to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton is speculating that Israel has just days to act before Iran brings its nuclear plant online. Jerusalem Post military correspondent Yaakov Katz joins us on the phone from Jerusalem. Welcome to Newsmax TV, Mr. Katz.
Thank you.
Mr. Katz, where do things stand with the Bushehr nuclear facility, and do you think Israel will take military action to destroy it?
No, in short, I don't think that Israel will take military action at this juncture to destroy the Bushehr reactor. From an Israeli perspective, the Bushehr reactor on its own does not pose a threat to the state of Israel. What poses a threat to the state of Israel are the rest of Iran's nuclear facilities, primarily the enrichment facility at Natanz, which is where Iran stores its centrifuges and enriches its uranium, the Iraq heavy water facility, which is where Iran potentially one day could refine plutonium for a nuclear weapon, as well as the Isfahan uranium refinement facility as well. So all of these different facilities, those are what pose the threat. Bushehr on its own is a reactor that could potentially provide energy, power for the Iranian people. On its own, with the right safeguards, the right supervision, it doesn't pose a threat to Israel. And therefore, Israel doesn't really have the justification at the moment to attack Iran because its Bushehr reactor is going online.
Why do you think Ambassador Bolton would have made those comments that he made if he didn't feel that there was a legitimate threat?
No, I'm not undermining the threat of Iran's nuclear program. Iran today poses an existential threat to Israel, with its declared intentions, A, to destroy Israel and wipe Israel off the map, and B, its pursuit of a capability that will allow it to do what its Supreme Leader Khamenei and what its President Ahmadinejad declare and say they want to do from every available podium, which is to destroy the state of Israel. With that said, Israel's current strategy, current policy, is the way I see it, is that Israel is trying to play ball and trying to cooperate with the international community and with the new round of sanctions that were passed in June by the Security Council and then subsequently by different independent countries like the United States, Australia, Canada, and others. Israel believes that real sanctions can actually have an effect on Iran, and I think we start to see some press reports that have showed that the sanctions are having an effect, not the desired effect yet. And there will come a point when Israel will have to decide if it should give the sanctions more time, or if time is up and it's time now to attack Iran to eliminate that threat. The time to attack Iran, though, is not because the Bushehr reactor is going online and going to become operational. The time to attack Iran will be when Israel believes that every other course of action has been exhausted, and when Israel believes that Iran is enriching uranium to higher levels, to the grade that it will require for a nuclear weapon. That is apparently what we're not at the moment.
Why do you think that the international community views it as such a threat?
Because this is the Bushehr reactor basically is an example of what Iran's nuclear program is all about. It's basically the fact that it's able to go online within a week from now, or just several days, is an example and a demonstration of the world's failure to stop what is possibly the greatest threat to regional, and not only regional, but world peace and world stability today.
Now, the Israeli Air Force has just announced new wartime guidelines should any conflict arise. There's also a report today that says that Israel is preparing for a chemical biological attack and building Judgment Day shelters. Does Israel see a war in its future?
Israel unfortunately feels war is in its future because it just experienced a semi or half type war in January 2009 against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, a larger scale war in the summer of 2006 against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and there's always the possibility of renewed conflict with those two terrorist organizations, which are rearming at an unprecedented rate, and also clearly declare their intention, which is to destroy the state of Israel. So Israel needs to be always on the verge of war and be preparing for war because it could erupt at any moment, and when tomorrow or even today. With that said, Israel does everything in its, everything it can do, and makes every effort to try to stave off war and prevent that war from erupting.
Now, President Obama has supported diplomacy and sanctions. In fact, the U.S. on Tuesday increased sanctions on Iran, but the president has shied away from military action in dealing with Iran's defiance. If Israel does strike, what kind of support, if any, would it receive from the U.S.?
That's the million-dollar question, because I'm of the opinion that while Israel can attack Iran without American support, right? Israel has the capability, in my opinion, from my understanding of the IDF's capabilities, Israel has the ability to fly the distance, to drop its bombs, and to set back Iran, cause enough damage to set back Iran by a year, 2 or 3 years even, and cause it extensive enough damage. With that said, Israel will need the United States for the day after a strike against Iran. Israel requires United States support for its military to get emergency shipments of smart bombs, of missiles, of weaponry, to get the diplomatic support it will require later on. And the big question is how Barack Obama, as the President of the United States, will respond. If Israel were to attack tomorrow, I would assume that Obama would be very upset and would not support that Israeli action. Therefore, I think what Israel's current policy is, and this ties into what I said before, is to play ball at the moment with the international community, to show the world we support your action, we support diplomacy, we support sanctions. And then, when Israel says that sanctions have exhausted themselves, they're not having the right effect, and our Prime Minister Netanyahu goes to your President Obama and says, look, we can't wait any longer. We have to strike, and we've given all of your engagement, which failed, and your sanctions, which have failed. We've given all of that time and chance, and it hasn't worked. Now we have no choice. We need you to support us. I think that's what Israel is going for. It's going for to be able to say to the world, we tried everything, we supported everything, and now we have no choice.
Last question real quickly, Yaakov. Russia is, of course, providing the nuclear fuel despite outrage from world leaders. What does this do to America's relationship with Moscow, a relationship that President Obama says is better than ever since the recent signing of that nuclear reduction treaty?
That's a great question. I think that Russia plays a very dangerous role at times. Russia, on the one hand, likes to cooperate with the United States on different issues, but on the other hand, it likes to flex its muscles and show the world that we too are a world superpower, and to knock heads. And the way to do that is to knock heads with the United States. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing now.
All right, Jerusalem Post military correspondent Yaakov Katz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.